Let's talk about that teacher who taught me that excellence and encouragement can coexist. We all have had teachers in our life who made an impact. And when I think about the teachers who shaped my own life, I think about my English teacher in secondary school. She was called Mrs. Balinga. She immediately comes to my mind. Why? Because she wasn't the easiest teacher in school. In fact, many students said in her class that she was the most demanding. She held us to incredibly high standards, and there were no shortcuts. She believed that mastering English required discipline, curiosity, and persistence. Looking back, I realized she wasn't trying to make our lives difficult. We thought she did. She was simply preparing us for opportunities we couldn't even imagine yet. One of the first books she placed in our hands was a book called First Aid in English, along with Student Companion. At that time, it felt overwhelmingly. Every lesson challenged us to think critically about language, not just memorize what it was. We didn't simply learn vocabulary words, we explored them. She insisted we keep a dictionary in our desk, in our backpacks. If we encountered a word we didn't know, we weren't allowed to skip over it or just wait for someone else to explain it. Instead, we opened our own dictionaries, searched for the word ourselves, and learned to become independent learners. Then came one of her signature routines. She taught us to break words into syllables. We clapped the syllables. We sounded them out. We studied prefixes. We studied suffixes. We studied root words. She showed us that language had patterns and structure, and once we understood these patterns, unfamiliar words became less intimidating. Suddenly, long, complicated words weren't impossible anymore. They were puzzles waiting to be solved. At the time, I thought she was simply teaching English. Now I realize she was teaching us something far much deeper. She was teaching us how to think, how to persevere, how to solve problems independently, how to believe that difficult things become manageable when we approach them one step at a time. What made her truly remarkable, however, wasn't only her high expectations, it was her unwavering encouragement. She celebrated every improvement, no matter how small. When we pronounced a difficult word correctly, she noticed it. She smiled. When we used a new vocabulary word in our writing, she would praise our efforts. When we struggled, she didn't lower the standards. She increased her support. She often reminded us, you are capable of more than you think. These words became more than classroom encouragement. They became a belief that I carried with me long after I left her secondary school classroom. She never allowed for mistakes to become sources of embarrassment. Instead, mistakes became opportunities to learn. If someone mispronounced a word, she gently corrected them and encouraged them to try again. If an essay needed improvement, she focused on what was growing rather than only what was missing. And somehow, she created a classroom where excellence and kindness existed. And this existed together. There was laughter. There were challenging discussions. There were moments of frustrations when we couldn't understand a passage or remember a grammar rule. But there was also a quiet confidence that developed over time because she never stopped believing in us, even when we doubted ourselves. Years later, I understand something I couldn't appreciate as a student. She wasn't simply teaching English, she was building confidence. She was cultivating resilience. She was actually helping us, ordinary students, discover extraordinary potentials in us. The dictionary wasn't just a reference book, it became a symbol of curiosity. Breaking words into syllables wasn't just a pronunciation exercise, it became a lesson that every difficult challenge can be broken into smaller, manageable tasks. Her praise wasn't empty flattery, it was intentional encouragement that gave us the courage to keep trying. So today, as a teacher, whenever I teach, I often find myself echoing the methods and her mindset. I encourage my students to explore language with curiosity, to embrace mistakes as part of the learning process, and to pursue excellence without fear, because the sky is the limit. I have come to realize that the greatest teachers don't just simply transfer knowledge, they shape and mold the way their students see themselves. That English teacher may never fully know the impact she had on my own life, but her influence will live on every time I encourage a struggling learner. When I celebrate a small successes, or when I remind a student that growth is possible. She taught me that high standards and compassion are not opposite, that the most intentional teachers hold students to excellence while walking beside them every step of the way. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson she ever taught, not found in any textbook, but demonstrated through the way she believed in us in that classroom. Because students rarely remember every lesson. We will not. But they never forget the teachers who helped them believe they could succeed. And I've never forgotten my secondary school English teacher. And I just want to take this opportunity. Maybe she is still out there, or somebody that knows her may see this. Mrs. Agnes Balinga of Collège Bilingue d'Application. Thank you very much for inspiring us, for helping us become the teachers that we are today. And hopefully we pass out this message to other teachers, pre-service teachers, teachers out there. Try to be intentional in everything you do, because your impact may simply last a lifetime in one of your students, just like Miss Balinga had on me. Thank you.